All right, everyone. I am excited to introduce you to my next guest, award-winning actor, author, composer, Broadway star. You loved him on Dancing with the Stars, Family Feud, Phineas and Ferb, and of course, beloved as Jay Peterman on Seinfeld. Please welcome to the show, John O'Hurley. Hey.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you very much for that kind introduction.
Uh, you are welcome. It's funny because my daughter, my youngest daughter, is obsessed with Dancing with the Stars now. She was so impressed. She was only 3 when you were on it. She was so impressed that I was talking to. Do you consider yourself the de facto winner? Because I know.
Well, maybe de facto is probably the best choice of words. Yeah, eventually I won. Yeah, but they had to turn ballroom dancing into something as competitive as the WWF to complete it that first season. Yeah, the voting was a little askew, so they had to redo it as a rematch, and I eventually won the rematch. Yeah,
that was an iconic first season. It's because now it's an institution, but you were on the first season. This is like the people that were on Survivor season 1. They didn't know. There's no strategy. There's no.
We were just trying not to fall down. That was the object in front of an entire country. Yes.
How did they convince you to do Dancing with the Stars?
Well, they had a lot of difficulty casting the show. They came to me first, actually. They took me over to a restaurant in Beverly Hills, sat me down with a bunch of other millennials and their open laptops, and they showed me the show as it appeared in Britain, and it was called Strictly Come Dancing. And they said it was the biggest hit over there, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful costumes, the live music, beautiful orchestra, just absolutely sensational. I said, well, this is a hit. What is it? They said it's a show about competitive ballroom dancing with celebrities. And I said, no, you got the wrong guy. I said, I'll be happy to host it. And they said, no, we want you to do it. I said, no, I'll host it. And they said, no, we want you to do it. And because I live by my imagination, I unfortunately saw a picture of myself succeeding in my mind. And with that, I said, well, okay, but who else do you have? And they said, well, now that we have you, we know we can get Evander Holyfield. And I said, what? And I said, I see what you're doing. You're trying to give America what they've been asking for many, many years, the Evander Holyfield, John O'Hurley matchup together on the level playing field of ballroom dancing. And I took the champ out in the 3rd round with my foxtrot.
You got to give the people what they want.
That's exactly right.
Those are the heydays. This is the first, I'd say, good half dozen seasons. My wife and I were pretty obsessed with the show. It was amazing when I looked at the year that you were on, because I'm like, oh my God, it's been 20 years this show has been.
I have to believe that that time does pass, and they've filled every one of those years with pretty much every season was a double season. So they've had close to 40 shows.
It's amazing. And it was huge. It was huge. Are you, because like that had like 13 million, 15 million people watch those episodes. Did that, like, all of a sudden were people now going, instead of saying, oh, it's Jay Peterman, where they're like, oh, you're the guy from Dancing with the Stars, John O'Hurley, what?
Yeah, well, you get your name back is what you do, because instead of Peterman, you're going by John O'Hurley. It has gone up and down in terms of viewership, but they seem to be on an upswing again. It seems to be very popular once again. Can't tell you why, but I did go. My wife and I went to the 20th anniversary show, and we had just a wonderful time there. And just seeing all the people we hadn't seen in years and years and years and years. It really is kind of a family, because everybody has gone through the trenches together.
Well, you were OG. You had Len, Carrie, and Bruno. It was a smaller cast when you were on it, though. Now
it was, well, I think a couple of people bowed out, so I think they only had 7 rather than the 10 that I think they normally have.
Right. They had Trista, the original Bachelorette, who I think is the only one of any of those shows that is maybe still married.
That's an interesting. Well, I still am.
No, I meant from the Bachelorette.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. No, I'm glad to hear you're still married. Mm-hmm. So Kelly Monaco, and then so what was it? Was it like, because your numbers were like better, right? I mean, she was falling, she was like, and then like, so it was just this.
Well,
like,
yes, I know they depended so heavily on the audience vote that they really boxed themselves into a corner. As it turned out, the winner of the 5th episode, the audience vote from the 5th episode, that would carry over into the the championship round. Well, it basically nullified the whole purpose of the championship round because she had already won the fan vote because she was on General Hospital. And they were kind of automatically, cued into that. None of us, had any kind of type of fan base that was associated with ABC. So anyway, you can see where they boxed themselves into a corner. They figured it out in the second season. So, you have to say, they were cutting their eye teeth as we were as well. So it all ended up well. And I actually saw Kelly at the 20th anniversary. It was good to see her. It was very sweet.
Did you trip her? Did you like trip
her? Did I trip her? Yeah. That's just so wrong, isn't it?
Oh, hello, Kelly.
Oh, it'll be Red Sox. It'll be Red Sox and Yankees, that type of thing. One or the other.
So, but the rematch was for charity, right?
Each of us got a large stipend to pass on to our charities of choice, and it turned out to be a very important thing for me. I sent my share off to it was called Golfers Against Cancer. Sounds like a very simple name. What they do is they get the money to the researchers inside of 2 or 3 weeks rather than having to wait 2 or 3 years. They're able to initiate very promising cancer projects with very little time delay, which is always very important. And Michael Milken was nice enough to match. I was given as a contribution. We ended up with close to $1 million that we were able to start 4 different cancer projects, which are still being used today. So I look back on all of that mayhem back in the early days of Dancing with the Stars, and it went to some really, really important research, and that's the way I look at it now.
Well, that's a great way to look at it. And that makes it totally worth it. Was there any particular dance that was just hard? I mean, it's like, to me, it's like, I'm not a dancer.
Anything hard?
They all look hard. They look impossible. I don't know how you do that. And I think I saw a clip of you where you said you lost 20 pounds or something.
Any dance that ended in a vowel, I couldn't do. It was as simple and as brutal as that. If it was a quick step or a foxtrot or a waltz, boy, I could just kill it. But boy, you give me a rumba, a salsa, a cha-cha-cha, It was, I was falling all over myself.
What's it feel like when you're there and you get like the waltz? I think you got all 3 10s. Like, is that just like, does it, because you put so much time and energy in. So I imagine like a low score or a high score, like, must feel really good.
Yeah, you know how well you did. You couldn't kid yourself or them. If you did well, the scores came in. Obviously, at that final episode when she fell 3 times and they still had to give her 3 perfect scores, I did scratch my head a little bit, and so did all of America. But anyway, that's the way it turned out. It was all fun. Listen, we had a great time. We started a great show, and that show deserves to be blessed with permanence. It's a great way for people to become better than they were when they started.
My wife was watching the clip. She's a dancer. I'm like, well, how did he do? And like, from your, and he's like, we watched the first dance and the last dance, and she thought, like, you're really good. She goes, he really commands the stage. It's rare that my wife cares who I'm interviewing, right? But she sees your name on my calendar. And so she's like, you're interviewing John O'Hurley? I'm like, yes. And so from the other room, all I hear, like, she's like, he loves dogs. I'm like, thank you. I'm like, he was on Dancing with It. He was King Neptune. I'm like, okay, thank you, hon.
I've had a checkered career, yes.
You've done a lot. What's the origins? Like, when did you know you wanted to go into entertainment? When did you get the voice? When did the hair go white? When did everything come together?
Well, interesting that if that's the process we're going through here, I was 3 years old when I knew. My earliest memories were of large people standing over me, asking me all the same question: what do you want to be when you grow up? And with a sense of disguise, and mind you, I was 3 years old, so I was still soiling diapers at the rate of 6 a day, and I don't know that I had a concrete career objective, but I thought maybe they were asking me because they were looking for a better idea for themselves. Finally, with a sense of disgust that only a 3-year-old could muster, I would put my hands on my hips. I would point to the television and the black and white TV in the corner of the room, and I would say, well, I am an actor, so that's what I'm going to be. And it wasn't that I wanted to be an actor. It's that I already defined myself as an actor. I knew when I was watching Romper Room or Captain Kangaroo or the Mouseketeer Club or any of that stuff. I knew I was supposed to be there. And for me, it was just about finding a way to connect the dots, I guess.
Was it Captain Kangaroo or Mr. Green Jeans that?
Oh, I don't know. Green Jeans he was, or Mr. Moose. There was a Mr.
Yes.
Moose there, I think, as well. That just came into my, boy, I haven't thought about that in 60 years, I'm sure. Yeah, all of those shows, I was supposed to be there. Yeah. And I would watch Rin Tin Tin and Lassie and all of those classic young boy plus dog type of things on television, and the Munsters and all those shows. I knew I was supposed to be there.
What's the first thing that kind of put you on the official path? Like, was it?
I would say it was many years later. That went through. I majored in theater and opera in college. Unfortunately, I was the only theater graduate my senior year, so consequently, I won the theater award. But I didn't end up in New York until 1981, and I would say when I began to take the business seriously, the business began to take me seriously. So 1981, I would say, was the date, and I got my first show 48 hours after I arrived in New York, and I never looked back. I never had to do anything else. I was always performing for a living, one way or another. Very fortunate. I've had a very blessed career.
What was that show that you got within 48 hours?
It was called Eternal Love. It was the worst Broadway musical ever put up, and I was in it. It was a medieval musical about the love story of Abelard and Eloise. I won't go into it much farther because you'll be hearing a large click sound of your audience there. It was terrible. It was absolutely awful, but it got me everything I needed. It got me into the Actors Union. I got an agent out of it. I developed a large cohesion of friends that were really helping me. Everybody helps each other along, and because it's a cruel business. That's where it all started. With that first terrible musical.
I know you've done like Chicago and Spamalot, just to name it.
On Broadway, yes. I've had Pirates of Penzance. I had Mass Appeal. I had 5th of July. I had a bunch of shows that I did there. But I would say, Chicago and Spamalot probably were my two favorites. I've done Chicago for about 15 years.
I have seen Chicago. I've always wanted to see Spamalot.
Very funny. One of the funniest shows I've ever done. Old Monty Python in Search of the Holy Grail.
Probably one of the better movie to play adaptions, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you describe stage different? Like stage, you're working a different muscle, right? It's a whole different experience.
It is. Stage differs from movies and television. Most importantly, in that once the conductor's baton drops, that's the beginning of the show. And there's no turning around and saying, okay, let's have another take on that. I didn't like the way that opened up. No, that's not the way it works. Once the show starts, it doesn't stop. In that, something that the audience doesn't know, that they're sitting out there and they're going to be you're going to surprise them with a story. And that by the end of the evening, in 2 hours or so, they're going to be standing on their feet and cheering and applauding, and that, and they don't. And that's a wonderful kind of feeling of potential energy, I guess you'd call it, if you're a physics major. It's always so thrilling. You can't do that in television and film. Those are editors' mediums. You put as much as you can, as much activity in a can of film, and you send it off to the editor, and they try to assemble a story out of it. But once you finish acting in the scene in television or film, your part is over. That's it. I mean, you will maybe come back and do some dubbing or whatever, but your sense of the character and the performance has already been completed, and you have no more control over it. Unfortunately, as opposed to theater, where you constantly do. Every night I can do a better show. I have one prayer that I say before I go on stage every night. I say, God, let me be surprised. And what I mean by that is I want to relax and be able to look every other actor in the eye. I want an honest response from them, because I know what I'm going to say. I just don't know why I'm going to say it yet. They're going to tell me why I'm saying my lines. You go around the stage looking for that, but you're also waiting every night for your surprise, because something will happen differently. And that's what I love about the theater, is that every night is always a surprise. So to say that my role as Billy Flynn in Chicago, the musical, is 2,000 times richer than when I started it 20 years ago is an honest statement, because over those 2,000 performances, I've always found a surprise.
So you would you choose taking everything into your own in front of a live audience versus the editor or the cameraman catching that nuance on camera, filming an episode of something.
Yeah. I mean, more often than not, the editors will get it right. They'll chop here and there, and it'll frustrate me terribly because I spent the whole week learning a Peterman monologue that's now on the cutting room floor. But they get the story together, and they get the laughs that they need. It was just a lot funnier the way we shot it.
Speaking of which, have you ever had dialogue as fun as when you did Peterman?
No, his monologues were the funniest thing that I would get to the point, I'd be halfway through the monologue, and I could see my lips starting to curl up on the side there because I'm going quick. I go from actor to audience very quickly.
So in Spamalot, you played King Arthur. Not even counting that, I looked up on your IMDb, and I'm not saying this is all of them, but you've had quite a number of king roles. A lot of them animated, but like there's and doctors. So I imagine like your voice and stature play well for kings and doctors.
Kings and mayors and presidents and it's there's kind of an urbane quality, I guess, to my delivery, and I like that. I think it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. So it's wonderful to be able to go into an animated studio and sit behind a microphone, and you could be wearing your pajamas. It wouldn't matter. But it's all about the delivery and how much fun you can have with the language and adding in things that might occur to you that are funny. And it's a very freeing experience, animated television. I love it.
Can it be lonely, or do you enjoy, or are you doing sometimes with some of the other voice actors, or is it usually just you doing your thing?
Well, most of the time it's you're recording individually. I mean, I've been all the way over in London recording stuff in LA. You have that kind of freedom because of the way our digital world works now. So, you have a freedom to it. I actually enjoy it, being myself, because it's, you're not really concerned about somebody else's timing or their interpretation of a role or what have you. It's just kind of take your stuff. In most cases, the directors are good enough to give you the context of how your character plays in this particular scene.
All right. So Phineas and Ferb is one of those shows that I watched a lot of because it was right in the sweet spot of when my kids were watching stuff like that.
I would watch it because I'm a parent.
Yeah, it's one of those where it's just hilarious.
It's Seinfeld for kids.
You're the evil doctor's
brother, the mayor of the town. Yeah. Mayor Doofenshmirtz, who, yes, he's the brother of the evil Dr. Doofenshmirtz. Yeah, the mayor doesn't care much about anything. As long as he doesn't have to work too much and gets his ample time in front of the cameras, he's happy.
I did see something on your IMDb. I just wanted to ask because he's one of my favorite comedians. Platypus Man, you did it was a short-lived series, but with Richard Jeni.
Yes.
I'd seen Richard Jeni a couple times actually, and live. So good. So good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you have any was there any?
I don't remember it very well because, again, I just went in literally, and it didn't last very long. And so it was one of those things where, and here's another thing about animation is that you do it so far in advance of when the actual presentation comes to television that you forget that you did it. I have so many things that I'll go to the mailbox and I'll see a check there and I'll go, well, what the heck was that from?
Do you ever do Comic-Cons?
Oh, yes, I do about sometimes as many as half a dozen a year. They're kind of fun. You meet the people that you are actually entertaining.
When you do those, is there a full cross section? I mean, I imagine there's obviously the hardcore Seinfeld people of a certain age, but
I've done things that attract. I mean, I've done some horror stuff. I've done. I did X-Files. So there's that group of people. There's Seinfeld. There's people that love 90s television. There's all sorts of reasons to be drawn to a Comic-Con. They've widened their menu of topics.
That's what I wanted to ask is, other than like some of the obvious ones that I would throw up because that's what is me, what I've noticed at the Comic-Cons, I don't know if this has always been this way or at least recently, the voice actors.
They are, yes. Yep. There is a lot of voice acting. Well, there's just so much animated television now.
But people just line up. I mean, they love. Like speaking of SpongeBob SquarePants, he was at one a year ago. I
Sure.
mean, the lines were insane
Yeah.
to meet him.
Yeah.
And on top of that, he would hold like a court, like a thing in one of the ballrooms or something.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does a little presentation. Sure. Yeah.
So that's a big one that you're part of in terms of pop culture. I mean, SpongeBob.
Yeah. Yes.
that was-
SpongeBob is fun. Spice Beckham is actually my wife, Hera, in SpongeBob. It's just mindless entertainment, and you never know what celebrity is showing up to be a member of the gang.
But I did have the X-Files down as well, because I like to just to hit the ones that I've watched at some point, or like the shows that I love watching and stuff.
Well, the X-Files episode was the famous black and white episode, the Frankenstein episode, where Cher was in it. And it was actually a very, very much a tongue-in-cheek style episode, but an awful lot of fun. And the black and white gave it such a distinct and individual look. We ended up winning, I believe, the Emmy for that show.
Such a great show.
Yeah, it was. It was very fun.
Before we get into like Seinfeld and Family Feud, this was you replaced you took over after Richard Karn. It's sort of like, and I mean, until Steve Harvey did it for now forever. It's like which I think he came after you. Maybe is
he did. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
When I talked to Richard Karn about this, it was like about every 4 or 5 years they'd bring in a new host and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Did you love doing that? I mean, I know you've hosted a lot of things. So you've hosted.
I have. I did quite a few. Scrabble, and then I did
Tell the Truth.
To Tell the Truth, which is really one of my favorite shows. And then Family Feud, which I really enjoyed. I would say I really enjoyed it. It played out to me like it was like a cocktail party that you had to just kind of steer along and let the insanity of what people will say when they're in front of a television camera, and they're like deer in the headlight, and they'll end up saying the stupidest things, and you just have to kind of let that play out and don't push it. You're there to push the game along, and but I enjoyed it tremendously. I had a good time. I'll be honest with you. Towards the end of my stay there, the show was getting a little non-creative and more of a penis joke. And I started to realize that all of the letters I was getting from people saying essentially, this is supposed to be Family Feud, and I can't show it at family time, at dinner time with my kids anymore because it's just too off color. And I got that, and it really bothered me that they were going that route because there were much more cleverer ways to put things. So it was time for me to leave.
Is there any time that you remember that somebody answered something and you lost it? Like it just caught you off guard so strongly?
Yes, there was a time when two guys came up to the face-off, and I would say both were college educated. And the question I said was, we surveyed 100 people. Top 6 answers are on the board. Name a classic film that begins with the letter C. And you would say?
I would say Casablanca.
Casablanca, Citizen Kane, Caddyshack. They were all up there. The guy goes, Seabiscuit. You can't make that up.
It's got to be hard. I mean, all game shows are easy when I'm on my couch, and you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Of course they are. You have it's when you are in an odd environment all of a sudden, and the camera just scares people because they don't know what to do with it. You know, when I had my early years in television as well, the same thing. All of the movement and dialogue in this large room doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is this little black hole, and everything has to go into that little black hole, and that's all that matters. And so you're sitting there trying to figure out, and that black hole has too much importance. You know what I mean? So that's what happens when people are on game shows or on television for the first time, and they see that black hole and they go, ooh, they freeze up.
Right, like the old Brady Bunch episode where Cindy froze. Yeah. My oldest daughter still loves watching Family Feud. So I agree with you. It's like it is something that's just kind of a good thing for you to watch and not have to worry about what's being said. And are you gonna be embarrassed if your parents hear you watching the thing that you're watching? I watched an episode of I found one of To Tell the Truth because I love that show. That's a classic. They keep bringing it back. I
had the best time with that. That was my favorite because I had such a wonderful comedic panel with me that I just loved their improvisation. It was just wonderful.
The one I found was the person who invented this thing called nudicles, which were testicles, replacement testicles for dogs that get neutered.
Yes, yes, exactly right. So that they could have something to put in the sack, shall we say?
Yes. And that kind of show like who's doing the research and deciding like who's going to make an interesting enough
Well, it
story.
was that's an interesting question because this was prior to the internet. We would do this show, and I want to say it was back in the late 90s, early 2000 perhaps, and that was when we were doing the show. So the internet and the Google search really wasn't there yet. So you had to do a lot of your own planning through, I don't know, Encyclopedia Britannicas or what. I don't know. It wasn't. There wasn't much in the way of help. But once, in fact, we had Sergey, who founded Google, actually on to tell the truth. And he fooled the entire panel. And I guess they walked off with about $300, which I'm sure has done him well. The items that we had on the show were just, we had a really good writing crew, and they could find little things that were.
Right. Because you have to find things that are really interesting,
Yep.
but not to the point where anyone would actually know
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
what it is. Yeah.
Yep.
It's such a fun show to watch. And it's like one of like Match Game they keep bringing back. There's always like a version of To Tell the Truth.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of your early career was in soaps.
I was, for about 10 years, I was Mr. Daytime Television. I did everything you could on every show on daytime. I started off on The Edge of Night, and then I became the first twin brothers on daytime. I was over on a show called Loving on ABC. Then I went over to All My Children, to Santa Barbara, and then finally on The Young and the Restless, which was the #1 television show. So I ended up over there for a while.
When you're playing twins, you get paid double?
I got paid double, but not quite double. But I'll tell you can I tell you a funny side story to that? In order to play twin brothers, you have to have a body double that looks like you so they can shoot over the shoulder, and you can be talking to yourself or have fist fights with yourself or otherwise engage with yourself. And so they had to find somebody who was my approximate height. Now, I had dark hair at the time. So they were looking for somebody with very dark hair and my height. And they found a guy. He was a bouncer at a nightclub called the Limelight down in Chelsea in Manhattan. So he came up every day, and he would be my body double. Now, the problem with that was he would have to speak my other lines that I was for the other character. And he was kind of a D stems and does kind of guy. So everything was kind of like this. And I said, oh, my God, this is driving me nuts. I can't listen to myself in that tone of voice. So I asked the producer if you could just tell him in a kind way, he doesn't have to say anything, I will call, or I will do my lines and space them in. I'll be able to handle it. Don't worry. And so all he had to do was just kind of stand there. And when we would finish each scene, he would say, well, if to finish with me, I'm going to go down to my dressing room. I'm finishing my play. And I said, you're writing a play? He says, yeah, I'm writing a play about the stories of my life. And I said, well, good for you. And so he went back down to his dressing room and proceeded to write Bronx Tale. It was Chazz Palminteri.
I feel like that's a Paul Harvey story. And now you know the rest.
And now you know the rest of the story. Isn't that funny, though? He was my body double and for years. And that's how we wrote Bronx Tale, was in the dressing room there.
That's amazing.
Isn't that funny?
Did he give you a part in the movie? Or
No. We're so good friends, though. I see each other kind of all the time. You know, the business is very small. You see everybody all the time.
The other huge thing that you do is a national dog show. Everything.
That's the big. That right now is becoming the biggest thing that I do. That I would say next to Seinfeld, the numbers are through the roof now. We just got our numbers from the last show, and we're up another 11% over the year before. And that was up 10% over the year before that. So it's just growing and growing and growing at a time when television is still trying to find an audience, which is disintegrating. We seem to be going in the other direction. We're up close to 30 million people now.
That's amazing. Well, you got a good time slot right after the parade, right?
Couldn't be better. It's that 2-hour time slot between the parade, Macy's parade, and football. It's golden hour. You've got people that are 4 and 94 sitting on the same sofa, and you've got something that's good for all of them.
Well, everyone loves dogs. I know you love dogs. I know you wrote books on dogs. Is there ever I know a Belgian sheepdog won this year. Has there ever been a Kelly Monaco, John O'Hurley type controversy at the end where you had to do a runoff?
No, they really don't, because, when it gets down to the 7 dogs that are in Best in Show, quite frankly, it's a difficult decision that a Best in Show judge has to make. It requires a great deal of knowledge in all 200 plus breeds to be in that position. But he could probably throw a dart on a board and pick a really good dog, because these are dogs that have gone through the day and they have already won their breed. They have already won their group. And so they're one of the top 7 dogs. You're not going to go wrong with picking any one of them.
Now, I say this because I think I saw it on a wiki. So I say it and you confirm it. Was this the whole idea inspired or have something to do with the movie Best in
Yes.
Show? Okay.
Yes. John Miller, who was the head of NBC Sports at the time, took Michael McKean and Christopher Guest's show, wonderful parody of the Westminster show. He took it home and watched it over the weekend. Best in Show is the name of the movie, and it was hysterical. He came in Monday morning to the meeting at NBC Sports and said, I know what we're going to do with that 2-hour slice between the parade and football. We're going to do a dog show. Well, they about laughed him out of the office, and he, by the end of the day, he had licensed one of the shows from the Kennel Club of Philadelphia as the National Dog Show, and then he added in Purina as the presenting sponsor. And on Tuesday morning, he called me in L.A., and I picked up the phone, and I said, hello, and he said, woof, woof. And that's how it started.
That's amazing. So, yes, because one of the best scenes in Best in Show is Jim Pittick and and Fred Willard.
No, of course, yeah. That's good. Have you ever thought of putting little hats and little pipes here? He says, I give these ideas away for free,
You wrote a couple of books on dogs, so I assume
I've written 3, yeah.
3, yeah. They're sort of like Everything I Learned in Kindergarten, but about.
Well, I like the premise. The first 2 books were kind of, one was a follow-up of the other. The first one was called It's Okay to Miss the Bed on the First Jump and the Other Life Lessons I've Learned from My Dogs. A rather long title, but it makes its point. And it is the premise was that we've learned everything we need to. And if you watch your dogs carefully, they teach you what you need to know in life. And then I followed it up with more specifically a thought that I had, which was before your dog can eat your homework, first you have to do it. And so that was a kind of a series of letters that my dog wrote to my newly born son, because he totally distrusted I'd ever be able to teach him anything on the subject of manhood. And so that's what that second book is about. And the final one is called The Perfect Dog. And it was written to my son when he asked me if the dog that was the picked Best in Show, is that a perfect dog? And I wrote him a poem in response to that, which ends with, the dog that is perfect is the one next to you. So that became a very popular children's book. It's now, oddly enough, become a very popular children's musical. And it's done all over the world in children's theaters. So it's had some success in another life in another form.
That is really great. That is really cool. Yeah, I was interviewing Rose Abdu. She said, we were talking about dogs, and she said there was a quote, I think, and one of the things that they love you forever and only break your heart once. Dogs are the best. I have a little Maltese.
Oh, that which was a breed that I had. I had one that lived till 21 years old. A long age for a Maltese.
That is, yeah. I hope mine does, because
I hope so too.
She's Princess Lola. She's a superstar on Instagram. Yeah. We normally, before that, we'd always had rescue. Big fan of rescue. We had a rescue dog, collie English Springer Spaniel mix. Just
wonderful. Also another beautiful breed, the Springer Spaniel.
Smart dog too. When we got him, he just looked at us and knew not to bark his head off and nonstop until we got home.
Yeah, don't worry. I'll train myself.
Very cool. Seinfeld. So Jay Peterman, one of the classic characters from Seinfeld, Elaine's boss. What's the origin of it? I know you were on a different sitcom and that got canceled, and then the timing just happened to be almost immediate.
Yeah, next day.
Literally next day.
Literally the next day. I was out with my manager crying in my beer, trying to take the cancellation of the show that day as personally as I possibly could. And Larry David's office called and said, we had this guest star. If John wants to do it, it's but my manager never, I told him no originally because the ego was too pronounced, I suppose. And so my manager called me the next morning and said, I never called them. They're waiting for you over there. So go ahead. So I ended up doing the show.
Was Seinfeld at the time when for Larry David just to kind of call you, was it something?
Well, they knew me. They knew me, and I'd been on other auditions for other characters on the show, but this one they particularly knew, and they knew that I could chew it up and have fun with it.
Oh, what other characters, John, were you up for?
I was up for the maestro.
Oh, okay.
And I was also up for the dentist that Bryan Cranston did.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. But it's funny. You think of all of that stuff, and no, the right role was waiting when the right role needed to be there, and it all worked out perfectly.
That always happens, doesn't it?
It is. When you take that half look over your shoulder and you say, well, there's my career.
Did you know it was going to be such a reoccurring character?
No, not at all. No. They hadn't even finished writing the episode. She was just meeting him for the first time on a street. And they just, used it as a kind of a funny side note. It wasn't until the show had some success, that part of the show had the success that it did, that they brought the character back early in the next season.
What was your sort of approach then to making it not a kind of a one-note gag, right?
Well, I mean, when they handed the script to me, they also handed me the J. Peterman catalog, which is the craziest catalog I've ever seen in my life. It looks like a Hemingway novel for an Oxford button-down shirt with a price, a size, and availability. It's just bizarre. If you go to jpeterman.com, you'll see the catalog that we parodied and all of this verbiage that, as I say, looks like a Hemingway novel. But I also said, as I'm reading through it, they said, we just wanted him to sound the way that the catalog is written. And so this is just traipsing off his tongue. When I was looking through the catalog, it occurred to me that it sounded a little bit like a 40s radio drama and a bad Charles Kuralt. If you put the two of those together, that was Peterman.
When you were doing, I mean, did you have a feel for the show and some of the other characters that were popping and realizing?
I had never watched the show. Never watched the show. No. It was, in fact, when I finished doing the table read, and the table read went very well because this character just clicked inside me. They all were very appreciative, and they thought it was going to be very funny. And I called my manager immediately, and I said, this is the #1 show on television. I said, it's not funny. Shows you my ability to perceive a script success. Yeah, I had so many second guesses about this character. I said, I don't get Seinfeld. The thing was, I was coming from a standpoint of setting up a joke, deliver the punchline, set the joke up, deliver the punchline, the old Golden Girls format of comedy. And that's not what Seinfeld was. Seinfeld was a show where you had to deliver every scene passionately, as though it was Streetcar Named Desire, and let the passion make the show funny. Because that's the only way the show worked. It wasn't a joke. There were no jokes. You weren't setting up for jokes. And, it was all about playing the scene passionately and the ridiculousness of what we were passionate about.
That's spot on. That's what made Airplane the original Airplane.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Play like if you think you're in a drama. And
if you play it like a drama, it becomes funny. If you're there, relaxing and kind of cursing along with the lightness of the material, not going to work.
You did about, I don't know, with 20, 22 episodes as J. Peterman, and was there?
I've never really counted, but it's 20 plus, 25 maybe.
At some point, is the pressure building? Like the first couple of times, you're just creating it. So this is new for everyone. By episode 10, 15, 20, where you're doing, now there's like expectations of the character.
Well, the expectations were never on me. They were on the writers. Because as Shakespeare once said, the play is the thing. Never said the actor was the thing. It wasn't the producer is the thing. It was the play, the words. So the words have to be there for you to put your arms around them and try to structure it into something that's palatable for that character to develop. They never missed because Peterman gave them a chance to write in long form rather than the short form, as I said before, Golden Girls style of dialogue. No, this was all about monologue and, taking a right, starting to talk to Elaine and saying, that reminds me of a time when I was traveling, and she would just roll her eyes and I'd take a right-hand turn and I would never come back.
All right. So Peterman is a real person
He is a real person with a real catalog, and he had no idea what Seinfeld was or the fact that he was on it one night.
So he wakes up
and they said, we watched you on Seinfeld. He said, no, I was on a plane. He said, no. Well, all of a sudden you find out what is the reality of this and what happened. And the first thing you do is your next call is to your lawyers and saying, okay, they did this without permission. It turned out to be the greatest piece of publicity that Seinfeld ever gifted the Peterman Company.
That's amazing. Were lawyers involved after the first time?
No, that part of it disappeared very quickly. It was more about how do we make sure that you're not harming the Peterman Company, with what you're saying. So each episode that I was in, they had to sign off on the okay for the script. But they never, he said, I'm not in the world of comedy. He said, I'm just assuming that they're having fun with it, and we'll be okay, I suppose. And he wasn't too crazy about the idea because, again, he said he was sensitive to what he had built as a company and the fact that I was a raving lunatic. I mean, I was a corporate Mr. Magoo. Every time I would open my mouth, Elaine would roll her eyes and, we're off on another adventure.
And now you're actually part of the catalog, right? You're a co-owner?
Well, yes. About a year or two after Seinfeld ended, the company went through some extraordinary financial difficulties and ended up going Chapter 11 very quickly. About a year or so after that, about the year 2000, he called me, John Peterman called me, and because we had become friends, as you can well imagine over the years, joined at the wrist and ankles. He had certainly lost his identity as J. Peterman, and I was now J. Peterman. So he called me and said, I have the intellectual property rights back for the show. If you want to help me put the company back together under our parallel strengths. So I wrote him a large check, and I was part of the company and on the board of directors. And it was I'm still part of the company. So it's been going on for many years, and the company does extremely well. As I say, if you go to jpeterman.com, you'll see the character and you'll see the script that we parodied, and everything is there. And it's one of a kind romantic wear.
That is an amazing story. That it really
I liked the character so much, I bought the company.
You became him for real. So was working with Julia Louis-Dreyfus just
treasure? I mean, it was like, for me, it was the surreal version of Lou Grant, of Ed Asner and Mary Tyler Moore. There was just the same kind of surreality to their relationship, which was so much fun. And she is, quite frankly, the greatest physical comedienne that we have in our industry. You'd have to go back to Lucille Ball to find a physicality, somebody that is willing to go down with the ship to get the laugh. And she certainly would do that. You saw her with her dance or with, or many of her other physical manifestations.
I mean, amazing in all the TV shows, but even when she wins an award, and she just goes to accept it. I mean, she turns that into a thing also. I mean, she's absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah, she is a treasure.
I'll list off a couple of things. You tell me if you remember doing them or not. No, just kidding.
All right.
All right. Well, Flintstones, Mr. Slate.
Mr. Slate, yeah.
That's pretty cool. When you're part of some of these, because you're some classic ones, like my next ones are Scooby-Doo and Looney Tunes. And I know you've done Disney.
Skipper, Skipper Sheldon. Yeah.
Are these pinch me moments? I mean, is it even as a
well, the one that I consider a pinch me moment is I was the Phantom Blot. I don't know if you have that there on but the Phantom Blot was part of the Mickey Mouse original group of characters. And the Phantom Blot was nothing more than a blot of ink, but it had a character. There was only two of them in the history of television. The original one, and then somebody who came in and had to do it once. And then there was me. And so I was the Phantom Blot. And so I always pinch myself because as a child, I remember watching Mickey Mouse cartoons and the Phantom Blot being part of it. And here I are. Now, I could say the same thing about the fact that I was on Family Feud years ago, back in the 80s, as part of the Boys Against the Girls in daytime television. And I don't remember much about the show, except I was watching Richard Dawson and I'm going, this is a pretty good gig. And sure enough, 20 years later, I had the show.
So you were on Family Feud once before.
I was on Family Feud, yeah.
That is right. Yeah, I think Frank Welker was the Phantom Blot. And then Coors Light commercials. Were the voice?
For many years, I was the spokesman for Coors Light, about 10, 12 years, I think. I wasn't allowed to drink anything but Coors Light, although that's not true. That was going to be my question. I don't remember ever having a Coors Light, although I did drink a lot of wine. I'm a wine collector, so my beverage of choice.
Do you have one thing that you've done that's your favorite thing that people don't ask you about that we wouldn't have talked about? Like you're like, oh, I did this thing and like I love it, but no one.
Well, I have a show right now that I tour around. Could say I toured around the country, but I actually toured around the world. It's my one-man show that I wrote, and it's a one-man musical entitled A Man with Standards. The standards being the music of the 40s and the 50s, and I use that music to underscore the stories of my life. And so it's a lot of fun. As I describe it, it's music, it's laughter, and only one tear. So it's a very poignant show. And I tour that around the country at municipal venues all over the place. And then I also head overseas on Regent Cruise Lines. And I do the show over there as we crisscross the Mediterranean and what have you. So it's been a lot of fun. I like that show a lot.
Incredible. So anything coming up now? Any big things on the horizon?
Yes, I've done 5 movies. One of them, it's a Christmas movie called All is Merry and Bright. We have another one called Pickleheads, which is a parody on pickleball, and it's a very funny one. It's just silly, silly fun. Then I have 3 others that are still working titles, so I don't know what they'll end up calling them. So it's been a busy year. Right now, I'm doing a remake now of The Wizard of Oz, which combines a little bit of Peterman in there, along with the actual wizard. And so it's called The Wonderful Winter of Oz.
Aren't they bringing Phineas and Ferb back, or did they already? Or
I've already recorded it. Recorded. Yeah, I'm back, and they have a brand new season. And also King Neptune is still around, too, on the sequel called Patrick.
Oh, amazing. All right, love that. So, all right, well, these voices are like, you just keep doing these, right? Hopefully you'll do these forever.
Seems to work.
You're amazing. Thanks for hanging out with me.
Great to talk with you, Jeff.